Hello, friends! You've probably heard that if you do good to others, it will come back to you, and it really is true. Sometimes having done a small good deed, you can receive a huge reward. Today, we have an amazing story about some of the best human qualities, kindness and courage. You will definitely like it. Watch until the end. One warm summer day, my family and I were walking in the park. The weather was beautiful, and my husband and me were walking along the path holding the hands of our little son, enjoying the birds singing. Suddenly, our day was interrupted by a shrill female scream. My husband immediately rushed to the voice. I grabbed my son in my arms and ran after him. In the dense thickets of lilacs, a terrible picture opened up to me. I saw a slim young girl who was helplessly trying to fight off two tough guys. One of them was holding her hands, and the second was working in her pockets trying to grab her purse from her thin wrists. The girl no longer screamed, but simply choked on her tears. My husband was a sportsman in the past, and he easily helped the young girl get rid of the hooligans who hurried to escape as soon as possible. We took the girl by the arms and escorted her to the nearest bench, where we gave her water and calmed her down. On her slim body, a small tummy clearly protruded, and I guessed that she was pregnant, even though the term was most likely short. We walked her to her car, and then we went home. The next weekend, we again went for a walk in the park, where we met our friend on the same bench, but she was accompanied by her husband. He came up to us, shook my husband's hand, and thanked him for saving his beloved, and invited us to visit them. But unfortunately, we never met again, since we moved to the other end of the city. 20 years later, our son grew up, studied at the university where he met his girlfriend, Helen. She was a very sweet, well-mannered, and modest girl. My husband and me immediately liked her as if she was our own daughter. She came to visit us more and more often. We'd already started thinking about a wedding and asked when the young couple would decide to introduce us to her parents. One day, they told us that the time of meeting had finally come and they wanted to invite Helen's parents to visit us next weekend. We were looking forward to meeting them soon. We started preparing with pleasure. We made a menu for the festive table, wrote a list of necessary products, bought everything from this list, and were waiting for the weekend. On Friday evening, I started preparing the salad, and my husband was cooking the meat when suddenly he grabbed his heart. His face instantly started turning blue, his eyes stared at one point, and he slowly began to slide down to the floor, holding only the back of the chair. I do not remember shouting to my son to call the ambulance or trying to lift my husband off the floor. I could not figure out what to do in such a situation. The ambulance arrived very quickly. My husband was immediately put on a stretcher and taken away with a diagnosis of acute heart failure and some other syndrome. I could not even hear it at the time. Then we had a sleepless night in the hospital, gray walls around us, just waiting. It felt like eternity waiting for the door to open and have at least some kind of news brought to us. And when it did, the news was disappointing. My husband had an expensive operation for which we simply had absolutely no money. I already figured up how much we would get if we sold our apartment and our car. I called all my acquaintances, and people advised me to contact volunteers to help with fundraising. Helen, this whole time, was with us in the hospital and was sincere and understood our grief and cried with me. My son looked well, he was calm and he was restrained, and only by his nervous knocking of his fingers on the wall could we guess how much he worried. We spent almost all our time in the hospital. I was on the phone and called and wrote and called, looking for any opportunity to receive financial assistance. One morning, Helen came up to me and said that her parents were also very worried and wanted to come to the hospital to get acquainted. What a terrible way to meet, I thought. I imagined our acquaintance in a completely different way, having dinner, listening to cheerful music and ringing laughter, and now there were only bare walls of the hospital and no reason for joy. But of course, I could not refuse and agreed. Her parents arrived within the hour. They walked along the corridor. I was sincerely happy about the upcoming acquaintance, but my eyes were dull and swollen from endless tears and despair. Yeah, I thought, not the best moment to meet our son's girlfriend's parents. They approached. Helen introduced us to each other. To be honest, I did not even really look at them. All my consciousness was occupied by my grief, but they smiled in a friendly way and rushed to hug me like family. I was slightly bewildered. It turned out that Helen's mother was the very girl whom my husband had saved from hooligans 20 years ago. They said that they'd been trying for a long time to find us because I had never truly thanked my husband for his brave act. I was incredibly surprised by this turn of events. It turned out that Helen was in her mother's belly when my husband saved her from those guys. Wow, what a surprise! They were looking for us for a long time, and finally our children found each other. Her husband said that over the years they managed to build a huge business which brought a large income, and that they would bear all the costs of the operation and further treatment and recovery of my husband. I just could not believe my ears that this was possible. My joy and gratitude were great. I could not find the right words to express my huge thanks. And they simply hugged me in a friendly, familiar manner and said that we were now one family and should help each other. 2 years have passed. My husband fully recovered after the operation. Last Friday, we, according to a common family tradition, all went together for groceries and prepared a huge amount of delicious food. We laid a beautiful, festive table and looked forward to our wonderful, beloved children. On this day, we celebrated their first wedding anniversary. The door opened and the young couple stood on the threshold, the most beautiful couple in the world. My son, who had matured very much during this time, became a very serious man, now responsible not only for himself but also for his family. And next to him, there was a pretty petite girl whose barely noticeable tummy was slightly protruding. Everyone was so happy. We would soon be grandparents. What a sincere happiness it is to have a strong, healthy, and friendly family. That is all for today, friends. Be kind, do good deeds with all your heart, and you will immediately notice how the world around you begins to change. Bye-bye.